The story begins in a city that is controlled by military forces. A terrible disaster strikes, and the residents are infected by a deadly virus. Most of them decide to flee to another city, but their efforts are stopped by the soldiers who order them to remain in the city. Those who disobey the military's decision will be sent to the isolation camps. The next scene. Commander Stone had been torturing the wife of one of his rebellious soldiers, John, for information about the hiding place of the residents who had escaped from the isolation camp. John refused to tell the truth, so Stone decided to take the ultimate action: kill Susan right in front of him. 3 years have passed, and the pain of losing his beloved wife still lingers in John's heart. Even though he is in hiding, John is secretly practicing self-defense in preparation for a day of reckoning. It is then revealed that John was once one of the members of the Special Forces under Stone's command. The Special Forces had massacred hundreds of residents who had been suspected of being infected with a dangerous virus. Now, with his wife gone, John is motivated to take his revenge on the man that caused him so much pain. John is consumed by guilt and sorrow after discovering the truth that the virus that hit the city was fabricated by Stone for his own personal gain, making the citizens victims of Stone's greed. John condemns the actions of his superiors and is labeled a traitor. However, when the medical team discovers that John is immune to the virus, they plan to make a vaccine from his blood, something John strongly resists and eventually manages to escape from the camp. He is now hiding in the forest, still haunted by the death of his wife, when he is startled by the presence of a wounded woman. Without hesitation, John takes the woman into his hut and begins to take care of her. The next day, Maria wakes up in John's hut and finds that a bullet is still lodged in her body. John had seen the military forces fire the bullet when Maria had tried to escape earlier. He helps her remove the bullet and is surprised to find out that it is not an ordinary bullet, but a tracking device. After the bullet is removed, Maria passes out. John realizes that Maria is being targeted by the Special Forces and notices a special barcode on her wrist. When she wakes up, John tells Maria that she can stay in his cabin for a while, but she must leave soon after she recovers, as he does not want to get into trouble since he is also the target of the Special Forces. 2 days later, a team of Special Forces members arrived at John's hut and asked him about Maria's whereabouts. However, John ignored them, and they wanted to search his hut. In the end, John managed to incapacitate them while Maria killed one of them. This made Maria realize that John was not an ordinary person, and she wanted to know more about him. But John refused to reveal his identity. The news about the deaths of the members of the Special Forces reached Roy and Lucy, their 2 superiors, who planned to report it to their commander Stone, the person who killed John's wife at the beginning of the film. Meanwhile, John was busy building a fort in his hiding place, expecting that other members of the Special Forces would come to retaliate. Later in the evening, Maria opens up to John and tells him why she is being chased by the Special Forces. Just like John, Maria's DNA is immune to the virus, so the military wants to use her. Maria is reluctant to give her DNA because she knows that the military forces would only give the vaccine to certain groups, and not to the poor citizens who are infected by the virus. They would only use the vaccine for their own personal gain, so they can take control of the city. Fate brought Maria and John together, who both have the same condition, but the difference is that John had to lose his beloved wife. Maria reveals that in the past she was a thief and had been imprisoned, but the virus outbreak had killed most of the prisoners as well as the prison guards. Maria survived because she was immune to the virus. The next day, John taught Maria how to use weapons to defend herself, emphasizing that no one is innocent and she should not kill. Soon after, John realized that 3 members of the Special Forces had come to the forest, and he deliberately got into the hut to lure them. When they got close, John quickly shot them and said goodnight. Unfortunately, Maria was caught by one of them, and he ordered John to come out of his hiding. John shot the man from inside the hut and then killed him. After exiting the hut, the superiors decided to send more people to capture Maria, not realizing that the one who was protecting Maria was John, a former member of their Special Forces and a skillful fighter. Meanwhile, John and Maria were preparing themselves to welcome the next troop's arrival when John took out a weapon he hadn't used in a long time. John asked Maria to get some water from a lake not far from his hut, but unexpectedly, she was surrounded by members of the Special Forces who had just arrived there. Assuming their main target had been captured, Roy immediately reported it to Stone, the commander, before he could finish his report. Suddenly, John appeared and started firing at them. Once again, Maria was saved by John, but unfortunately, Roy was still alive and immediately reported what had happened to Stone and asked him to send reinforcements. Commander Stone had instructed his men not to kill Maria and to capture her alive when the dispatched troops finally arrived. Despite being caught, Maria managed to kill the members of the Special Forces, and news of the death of his troops reached Stone's ears. He immediately sent additional troops and instructed them to kill the person who had been helping Maria. These additional troops arrived at John's hut, and gunfights and scuffles broke out again. However, John managed to defeat the Special Forces because he had prepared a strategy to fend off their attacks, and he was also very familiar with the terrain. On the other hand, the members of the Special Forces seemed to have difficulty attacking until in the end they met the same fate as the previous troops. Dozens of additional troops arrived this time, and they found a town near John's hut. Lucy was surprised when they reported to her that Maria had hidden above the tunnel and had fired at them until no one was left. The death of his men made Stone realize that he needed to change his strategy, and he planned to lure John into the tunnel. John was checking the situation in the forest when he accidentally met Roy, an old friend of his, and a fight broke out between them. Roy was not an easy opponent to defeat, and John was overwhelmed by his attacks, falling so many times. Unfortunately, at the same time, Maria was also captured. Returning to John, who wasn't really dead, he got up and went to find Maria. Meanwhile, Roy took Maria to the tunnel with the troops. John overheard the instructions from Commander Stone through the comms of the dead troops. John orders them to gather in the tunnel without thinking and head straight there, not realizing that it could be a trap set by Stone. When he arrives, he meets Roy again, and they start to fight. Meanwhile, Stone and his troops are waiting for Roy at the end of the tunnel. John is having a hard time with Roy's fighting skills, but he still manages to survive until Roy eventually hits him. At one point, John manages to overpower Roy and kills him. He then takes Maria with him out of the tunnel, only to find that the troops have blocked the in and out access. With no other options, John and Maria have to fight them. Another shootout ensues, and they manage to defeat the Special Forces, but not long after that additional troops arrive. In the end, John and Maria manage to survive and escape. John throws smoke grenades to block their view and uses this opportunity to run towards the exit on his way to escape. He is hit by a shot from Lucy, but still manages to survive. He and Maria enter a room, and he orders Maria to hide there until it is deemed safe. He will then lure the enemy troops out of the tunnel. Unfortunately, too bad Stone and his troops are already waiting for him at the end of the tunnel, and John has no choice but to surrender. Finally, John meets his wife's killer again, and now Stone understands why Maria is so difficult to capture, as there is John who has been helping her. Stone then asks him where Maria is. Of course, John won't tell him, even though he is being tortured by them into confessing. Stone can't make John open his mouth, so John challenges Stone into a one-on-one duel with him. Stone, who feels challenged, happily agrees. John manages to defeat Stone in front of his men, and Stone orders his men to give him a weapon, but none of them want to comply due to their hatred for their commander. Storm then forcefully grabs a weapon from one of his men, but Stone is shot with the gun he is holding. At the same time, Maria comes out and surrenders, showing them 2 grenades and threatening to blow herself up if Lucy doesn't let John go. Lucy grants Maria's request, and she is brought to the headquarters, while they leave John in the forest. It turns out that earlier John had given his blood sample to Maria, so they can use that as a vaccine. In the end, a vaccine is made from John and Maria's blood samples, and the citizens can live peacefully in the city. So what did you think of this movie? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below, and if you enjoyed the film, please like and share it. See you next time if you subscribe for more movie recaps.